Before they became known as the Silent Twins, they were simply two little girls born on April 11th, 1963. June and Jennifer Gibbons entered the world together in Barbados. Within months, their parents brought them to Britain, hoping for opportunity, stability, and a better future. But what followed was a mystery thriller. It was the story of two children who experienced isolation, racism, separation, and years of misunderstanding. For decades, the public focused on their silence, their crimes, and the strange bond that they shared. But behind the headlines were two young women struggling to find a place in a world that often seemed unable to understand them. This is the story of June and Jennifer Gibbons, not as legends, but as human beings. This documentary discusses mental health, institutionalization, racial bullying, crime and death. The purpose of this video is not to sensationalize the story of June and Jennifer Gibbons, but to explore the human experiences behind one of Britain's most misunderstood cases. Some details may be distressing to viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. In the spring of 1963, identical twin girls, June and Jennifer Gibbons, were born to Gloria and Aubrey Gibbons in Barbados. Later that same year, the family moved to the United Kingdom, eventually settling in Haverford West, Wales. They were not only identical in appearance, they were inseparable from the very beginning. They also had siblings, including a younger sister named Rose, one of the few people the twins would continue speaking to during their years of silence. When the twins started school in the early 1970s, they were among the only black children in their community. They were bullied because of their race, their accent, and the way they moved and spoke together. The sisters withdrew further and further from the outside world. At first, they spoke less, then only to each other. Eventually, almost no one at all. They developed a rapid, private form of communication that outsiders could barely understand, a language that became a refuge from a world that had made them feel unwelcome. Teachers and psychologists became fascinated by their behaviour, but fascination did not bring understanding, and in 1977, officials made a decision that would have lasting consequences. The twins were separated and sent to different boarding schools. Instead of becoming independent, both girls reportedly became almost catatonic, withdrawn, unresponsive, and unable to function normally. The separation was abandoned, and they were reunited. For June and Jennifer, being apart did not weaken the bond. It revealed how deeply their identities had become intertwined. By 1979, June and Jennifer Gibbons were 16 years old. Most teenagers were thinking about friends, parties, first jobs, or planning for the future. But June and Jennifer were spending most of their time inside a shared bedroom. After leaving school, the sisters became increasingly withdrawn from the outside world. Their parents struggled to reach them. Conversations were rare, visitors were unusual, but inside that bedroom, something extraordinary was happening. The twins began writing obsessively. They filled notebooks with poems, plays, diaries, short series, and novels. Writing became their way of communicating feelings they could not express aloud. Each sister created elaborate fictional worlds, populated by lonely characters, outsiders, and people searching for acceptance. Their stories were often dark, intense, and emotionally charged, reflecting struggles that many believe mirrored their own experiences. One of the best-known works of June's novel, The Pepsi Cola Addict. Using money from their unemployment benefits, the twins self-published their books in 1980, hoping readers may finally understand them. The novel followed a troubled young man whose life spiraled through obsession, alienation, and emotional turmoil. Although few copies were sold, the act of publishing was significant. It showed that the twins were not simply silent, they were trying to be heard. During these years, June and Jennifer's bond became increasingly difficult. They loved each other deeply, yet they also competed constantly. According to later accounts, they could become intensely frustrated with one another. They copied each other's movements, mirrored each other's expressions, and seemed unable to develop separate identities. June would later admit that, as teenagers, she sometimes wished her sister would die so that she could finally have a life of her own. It was a shocking statement, but it reflected the emotional prison both sisters felt trapped within. They were inseparable, and the inseparability was becoming painful. Neither June or Jennifer ever had children. Their adolescent and early adulthood was dominated by isolation, institutional involvement, and their complex relationship with each other, leaving little opportunity for ordinary adult experiences. By 1980, the twins had spent years largely cut off from society. They read magazines, watched television, and wrote stories about life beyond their bedroom walls. But imagination was no longer enough. They wanted excitement, independence, experience, and for the first time, they began looking outward instead of inward. The bedroom that had once protected June and Jennifer was beginning to feel like a cage. They had created entire worlds on paper, but they still had almost no place in the outside world. In late 1981, June and Jennifer began committing a series of offences that included petty theft, burglary, vandalism, and setting fires. Some of these fires were started in abandoned buildings, while others caused significant damage. The sisters were eventually linked to 16 offences involving theft, burglary, and arson. For many observers, the crime seemed completely at odds with the quiet, withdrawn girls they had once been, but others believed the offences were a desperate attempt to break out of years of emotional confinement. When the twins appeared before courts, they were no longer viewed simply as unusual sisters. They were viewed as a risk. By the age of 19, they were detained under mental health legislation and sent to Broadmoor Hospital, one of Britain's most secure psychiatric institutions. It was an extraordinary sentence for two young women whose crimes, while serious, were not murders or violent attacks on people. What made the case different was the belief that the twins' psychological relationship posed a danger both to themselves and to society. Broadmoor Hospital housed some of the country's most serious psychiatric patients and offenders. For June and Jennifer, arriving there meant entering a world of locked wards, strict routines, medication, and constant observation. They would remain there for 11 years. Many people have since asked whether the twins were failed by the system. Consider what had happened before Broadmoor. They experienced racial bullying. They became increasingly isolated. They were repeatedly studied by professionals. They were separated against their wishes. They struggled to access ordinary social support. And when their behaviour became dangerous, they were placed in a maximum security psychiatric hospital. Supporters of the decision argued that the twins needed intensive psychiatric care. Critics argued that the two deeply traumatised young women were treated more as a clinical puzzle than as vulnerable people. The debate continues to this day. Inside Broadmoor, the sisters' relationship became even more complicated. They remained intensely connected, but they also believed that their bond was preventing either of them from living independently. Over time, they began discussing a disturbing idea. One of them would have to die so that the other would finally be free. This was not a sudden decision. It emerged gradually during their years in hospital, growing out of guilt, dependency, resentment, and a desperate longing for a normal life. One of the ongoing controversies surrounding the case is the amount of medication the twins received at Broadmoor. June later suggested that she believed the treatment had harmed Jennifer. After her sister's death, June spoke openly about feeling that Broadmoor had taken Jennifer away from her. However, there has never been any conclusive evidence that medication directly caused Jennifer's death. The official medical findings pointed to a different explanation. By early 1993, hospital staff concluded that the twins could be moved to a lower security facility. It was a major step toward freedom after more than a decade inside Broadmoor. In March 1993, they were transferred to Caswell Clinic in Bridgend, Wales. For the sisters, this was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter. On 9th March 1993, shortly after arriving at the clinic, Jennifer suddenly became ill. She complained of feeling unwell and rapidly deteriorated. Within hours, she was dead. She was only 30 years old. The official cause of death was acute myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart muscle. Post-mortem examinations found no evidence of violence, poisoning, or suicide. The exact reason myocarditis developed was never fully established. For many people close to the case, Jennifer's death remained deeply unsettling because it occurred so suddenly, and the very moment the twins appeared to be moving towards release. In the weeks following Jennifer's death, June gradually started speaking to doctors, nurses, and family members. The change was not immediate or dramatic, but for the first time in decades, she was able to communicate with the outside world in a way she had never done before. To some, it seemed as though the sisters' pact had been fulfilled. To others, it was a tragic reminder of how deeply their lives had become intertwined. Later in 1993, June was officially released from psychiatric care. She had entered Broadmoor as a teenager. She left as a 30-year-old woman who had spent much of her adult life inside institutions. Unlike many people associated with famous criminal cases, June did not seek publicity. She returned to West Wales and chose a quiet, largely private life close to her family. Critics argued that June and Jennifer were treated as a medical curiosity rather than as traumatized young women in need of understanding and long-term support. Others believed that professionals were dealing with an unprecedented situation and made the decision that they believed was safest at the time. There was no simple answer, but what is clear is that the twin story forces us to ask difficult questions about mental health care, race, childhood trauma, and the way institutions respond to people who do not fit easily into society's expectations. In later years, June spoke out about feelings that she had lost her sister because of Broadmoor. She questioned the treatment Jennifer received and struggled with the fact that her sister died just as they were finally being transferred out of the high-security hospital. Whether or not Broadmoor has contributed to Jennifer's death remains unproven. The official cause was acute myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart muscle. But emotionally, June has never fully separated that loss from the years they had spent inside the institution. June and Jennifer never experienced many of the milestones most people take for granted. Yet, they left behind something else, a story that continues to challenge psychologists, historians, writers, and ordinary readers. Their lives have inspired books, documentaries, academic studies, and films. But perhaps the most important lesson is not about mystery. It is about human connection. Two girls who were bullied and isolated found safety in each other. Over time, that safety became dependence, and that dependence became a bond so powerful that neither sister believed she could truly live without the other. The world remembers them as the silent twins, but silence was only part of their story. They were daughters, sisters, writers, young women searching for belonging in a world that often made them feel invisible. Jennifer died at 30, and June finally found her voice. Whether that voice came through freedom, grief, or both, only June truly knows. More than 30 years later, the story of June and Jennifer Gibbons remains one of the most moving and unsettling reminders of what can happen when isolation Trauma and misunderstanding shape a life from childhood, and perhaps this is how they should be remembered. Not as curiosity, but as two sisters whose struggles was far more human than the headlines ever suggested. If you enjoyed tonight's documentary and would like to see more true stories, unsolved mysteries, and forgotten cases, please consider subscribing to our channel. Give this video a like if you found it interesting, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next mystery.